Welcome inside a holiday edition of the Scorers Table. Brian Hench and Danny Rago, Courtney Delks, Josh Sable here with you, taking you into the Christmas holiday with some high school girls basketball talk. How's everybody doing?
Doing good. Glad to be on Christmas break.
Danny and Courtney waved, which translate really well for the people who will be listening to this. I'm told we're going to be on Apple soon. Good job, guys. That's my fault. I should have mentioned we'll be podcasting. You can find us on YouTube, which is probably how you're watching us now. Soon we're going to have iTunes options available, Spotify, however you get your podcasts. And, this is fulfilling a lifelong dream for Josh, which is pretty exciting. You know, he opened up to me the other day about wanting to be a professional podcaster. And
that's right.
The fact that we're able to help facilitate our buddy getting there is exciting.
I appreciate that, guys.
That's great. That's awesome. Let's start off with the big game. As we record this, it was Monday night, and it was Fort Wayne Bishop Luers taking down Columbia City in overtime, 65-55. 2A Bishop Luers. They're ranked in there. They're a good team, make no mistake, but that's still, a 10-point win over a 4A school of Columbia City's caliber is pretty surprising. Danny, I know you watched it, so I'll let you take lead on this one.
Yeah. Look, Columbia City got its second loss, and that's – in and of itself, in my opinion, not the story. I think what's more notable coming out of that basketball game is I think Columbia City, just like every basketball team now, is starting to show some vulnerability. And look, Luers has some size. They have the Waring kid. They have Addie Shank, who notably is actually going to Huntington to play with Kendra Sheets for Darby Maggard. So there was a lot of familiarity there. But their third guard, Rhoda Hamill, she's got some size. And so Columbia City, this was a basketball game that intentionally played low in the score. And both teams zoned each other. The one thing first out of Columbia City is they started to show us something that I hadn't yet seen, which was they changed their levels with their pressure defense. So they showed a little bit of a 1-2-2. They dropped it and back into a flat 3-2, which they played the majority of the basketball game before they got down and went man. But when you're in a 3-2 zone, for example, flat, and they were playing Baxter at the top, there's now three players in the perimeter. There's obviously some rebounding vulnerability, and I thought Columbia City got hurt by Luers' size. There was a stretch there in the second half where the lead ballooned up to 9. And they got 7 points on 4 consecutive offensive rebounds in a row. And it's really hard to rebound out of a zone. And that's the one thing about, and we'll talk about it later in the pod. We're actually going to talk a little bit about zone versus man defense and things like that. But I think that was one thing that Columbia City, look, Molly Baker's a great player, okay? But that's a lot to ask of her. When they went man, when they were down 9, she was matched up against Addie Shank, which put Addie Baxter on Waring, and she was in foul trouble. She ended up fouling out of the basketball game with 9 seconds left. But that's a lot to ask a kid like Addie Baxter to guard a 6'2" post player. And Waring was everywhere on the glass. So I think it begs the question, fairly, is Columbia City big enough? And the second question that it begs is, does anybody have size to hurt Columbia City the way that Luers did last night? So in watching that basketball game, I think everybody will read your tweet, Hank, and say, oh, they got their second loss. They're coming back down to earth or whatever. Now, they're still a great basketball team. They can absolutely still win a state championship. But they did show some vulnerability. And now coupled with the coming off the basketball game against Norwell, where they shot 46% from the line and 12% from 3. And they didn't exactly, set the net on fire in this basketball game either. It begs the question now that we're getting to the point in the year where all of these basketball teams are starting to show some vulnerability. So I don't know, Josh, when you're smaller, do you look at rebounding in setting up your defense as something to really consider moving into a basketball game?
Right. So I did not see the game, but I'm just going to kind of speak on my experience. Columbia City averages 64 points a game. So I would want my offense and my defense to match. And it doesn't sound like if you're playing a zone, to me, I'd be worried about getting enough possessions and speeding up the game, especially if we're smaller. Because, you're going to give up some layups. You're going to give up some offensive rebounds. But if you're playing in a zone, what you're doing is you're going against your strengths offensively, which is a lot of possessions, high scoring, getting up and down, and playing to your strengths. And like I said, I didn't see the game, but to answer your question, I would have sped the game up, and try to get as many possessions as possible. And when you're playing zone, you're not really doing that. Like, your offense needs to complement your defense and vice versa.
Yeah, they ended up putting Baxter. So Luers played him in a extended 2-3 zone. And, obviously, Courtney, this, you want to get the ball into the middle of the floor. And there's an extra pass that comes out of that. And Josh, you can talk about your philosophies in attacking this extended 2-3, but now Baxter isn't 10 toes facing the basket. Now Baxter is playing with her back to the basket in the middle of the floor and was having to make an extra pass. Now, I totally get it. Amy's trying to play through her best decision maker, and I probably would have done the same thing, but it was definitely out of character. I wonder if they'll get zoned more, like in that extended 2-3.
It'll be interesting. Third loss of the season now second loss of the season for Columbia City. Bishop Luers is ranked 11th, by the way, in Class 2A, so a really good win for them. They're defending sectional champions. So like I said, it doesn't completely come out of the blue, but when you beat a team ranked as highly as Columbia City in the fashion which you did, it certainly does turn some heads and get some people's attention, which is well-deserved. You tip your cap to Luers. And I think, too, Danny, you kind of hinted at this, but it'll be curious to see how much that does actually hurt Columbia City not having the size, because honestly, that's kind of the Achilles heel, or one of the weaknesses for a lot of teams. I mean, HSE, the team that we saw the other night, doesn't really have that true post presence with main hooks out for the year. Noblesville has a really young post, and CeCe Quigley, she's only a sophomore. Fishers has one. Westfield might have one that's coming along too. She's young, so they're all kind of in the same boat. But Snyder doesn't have one, like Central doesn't. South Bend Washington does with Kira Reynolds, but I mean, overall, at least on the north side of the bracket, they don't have that true post player, and so I think it's gonna make for some interesting matchups, and maybe that gives somebody unexpected a leg up that we're not looking at or talking about right now. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how much, not just for Columbia City, but everybody, how that kind of impacts them, because I think for Columbia City, they make up for it with some more depth than some other teams and kind of a more balanced attack than some other teams too. So, you give and take a little bit.
Well, in less than 10 days, we're going to see Columbia City potentially, if they can both get by their first round matchup, we're going to see Columbia City match up against Jennings County in the Hall of Fame Classic. And there looms Julianne Woodard, who's not like categorically a post player. I mean, I think she measures at like 6 feet, 6'1", but she plays much bigger. Her arms are a lot longer. I think she can crash the glass, kind of grew up playing with her back to the basket before she's kind of moved her toes to facing the basket. But that will be a really, really good test for Baker and company playing Woodard. And so look, if they go down to Newcastle and take Woodard out of the basketball game, maybe all the vulnerability just vanishes. But it's like the schedule makers had this set in advance to say, okay, we're going to play Luers, and then you got to go 10 days later and play Woodard. So that'll be a great basketball game if we see it happen.
Yeah. As I pull up here, I think they play Indian Creek in the opener at that Hall of Fame Classic.
Yeah. See, and there's Wiseman. So you got to go through Wiseman and Woodard.
Yeah, and if you're Indian Creek, you definitely want to get that film and try to replicate what Luers did to keep the scoring down and to use your advantage, which in Indian Creek's case is Faith Wiseman.
Courtney, I was interested in that basketball game and taking Baxter off the point and moving her into the middle offensively. She's obviously an extraordinary talent. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, because you're taking a kid away. Again, she's the best decision maker. She is willing to make the extra pass, but now she's got the ball for an entire basketball game, catching it, not facing the basket, having to do things maybe out of character. And maybe that's one of the reasons why they didn't shoot as well. Maybe they didn't have as much effectiveness, but they're down 9 in that basketball game before they really turn it on. And did you ever have situations like that, or what's your thought on that? Like playing out of position?
Yeah, my thought on that. So from a player and a coach perspective is you got to have the ball in your best player's hands. You can't, like, I'm going to have her with the ball. And eventually, like, if she wants to get into the middle, like, make a wing entry pass and then you're getting in on a reversal. But at some point, get her into the middle because, you want to break it through the middle, but keep the ball in her hands, because if she can break, the 2-3 that's up high and she can split it, she's got the ball in her hands. She could get to the middle potentially and pull up. We see on the guy side, Braden Smith is breaking defenses apart doing that pull-up game. And if so, keep the ball in her hands. And then if she has to give it up, like, your best players are normally your best condition and they can get themselves in position. Then she works her way into the middle where she can actually have her chest and her feet to the basket and catch it in a better position, rather than my back's to the basket. I got to get the ball. I got to face up. So there's other ways to do it. And I think it keeps your best player in the flow and keeps the ball in their hands more.
I wonder, too, with this matchup and all regular season games, and Josh and Courtney, you can speak to this more, but I wonder how much of it is experimentation. Like, let's see what works. Like, these regular season games, they don't impact postseason play here. It doesn't matter, technically speaking. So why not throw some things at the wall and see what happens, see what works? Obviously, you don't want to give away too much, but if you're unsure about something and you've been running it in practice, and I'm not saying that's the case here, but I think it's another angle to take on it. I mean, how much of that does go on with the experimentation and just, moving things around and getting creative and funky in regular season games?
Yeah, something I've seen work well, too, against that high stretch 2-3 is, like, keep the ball in your best player's hands. Come set a high ball screen. Run it treat it like, man, if they're going to stretch out that much, and you can get so much out of it. You gotta work on it, but keep the ball. Columbia City's coach, keep the ball in your best player's hands.
Yeah, and it could be one of those things too, where like maybe Luers. And like I said, I'm not familiar with their team, so I don't want to speak out of school here. But this also could have been one of those things where maybe Luers caught Columbia City with a defense or something that they haven't put on film. And maybe they were saving this for this game because they knew that Columbia City was, a top 2 team. They were number 1 earlier in the year. And maybe it was one of those things where like Columbia City didn't really work a lot against it because they didn't see it, on film or in the scouting report. And that could have been, maybe something that happened as well.
It's a great point. I mean, that's what Plainfield did, or that's what Avon did to Plainfield a couple weeks ago. And another team that I covered too mentioned that the team they're facing hadn't seen a lot of zones. So we're going to throw it at them and see what they do with it. And it's beneficial for both teams. One team figures out they can run the zone. The other team realizes, this is something we might have to deal with. And they adjust with it and move on. Let's shift gears. A game, Josh, that you and I were both at. That was Center Grove beating Lawrence North 65-48. As I wrote in my weekly wrap and you and I talked about, I wasn't really surprised to see that Center Grove won. Like, I could have seen either team winning it. Was a bit surprised that it was as lopsided as it was. And honestly, it after the first, quarter plus, it didn't really feel all that close. Because, I mean, it felt like every time Wildcats had a little bit of life, Center Grove just immediately stamped it out.
Yeah, this game, I feel like all of the traps that I was talking about in the last pod about, okay, Lawrence North is focusing on Warren Central. That's a conference game. Less than 24 hours later, you got to go on the road and play a Center Grove team that has 3 days to prepare for you. I feel like that all of those things, like that's exactly what happened. Center Grove was prepared. Center Grove executed their stuff. I felt like LN looked a little bit tired, especially their guards. And you could tell that from their shooting. I think they were only like 3 for 14 from 3. But I think the one thing that surprised me the most, more than anything, is that Center Grove was 23 of 30 from 2. 23 of 30 for the game. They shot 77% from 2 against Lawrence North. And that was the thing that really shocked me. It wasn't really the outcome because, like I said, I don't think it's an indictment on LN. I think it's just the spot. Like if they were played against each other on a neutral site where they had equal time to prepare, I feel like it would be a completely different. The game would be a lot more competitive. But that was the one thing that did surprise me is that Center Grove shot 77% from 2. Lily Bischoff was the best player on the court. She was going right around the LN guards. It was getting whatever she wanted, whenever she wanted. I think they had 5 players. Center Grove had 5 players that had more than 9 points. It was very balanced. But like I said, I don't think that this is really who LN is. I think if they see each other again in the semi-state, it'll definitely be a lot more competitive. But to kind of piggyback on what Hank said, I know the final score was Center Grove won by 17, but like Hank said, like this game was pretty much over in the first quarter.
Yeah, it was really impressive. Bischoff was phenomenal. It seemed like everything she touched, she hit. And that's kind of the modus operandi for Center Grove in general, too. But, Josh, like you said, Center Grove didn't beat themselves. They run their stuff really well. They were prepared. But like you said, I think that for LN, it comes with the slight disclaimer that less than 24 hours earlier, they played Warren Central. But on the flip side of that, last year, because they do one of those stupid random draws before semi-state, we can't say with any confidence that this will happen again. But it was LN Center Grove. If they would have both advanced to semi-state, they would have played in the second game. So, there is the potential at least that LN faces this nearly identical situation in a couple months, at semi-state. So it'll be interesting to see how they adjust. But
yeah, and Steven looked like he just kept things pretty vanilla. Like I didn't notice like anything that he had special for this game. I'm sure like if they were to play each other again, like I said, they both had equal time to prepare. Like I would expect a completely different LN team in that game.
So as coach, and Courtney, I'll ask you this too: when you have a game like that, when you have the rivalry game on a Friday followed by a top 10 opponent on Saturday, how do you balance prep during the week, just in general, not applied to this game specifically, but how do you handle that? How do you approach that? Do you focus on one over the other?
I think you take it one game at a time, and more so at this point in the season. What I'm preparing our teams for is you're going to face this situation where you're going to have to play a back-to-back game to win a tournament. Like it's going to happen at some point. So I'm putting more of the focus on that and taking it one game at a time and just preparing them mentally for a situation that will come up later, whether it's at a tournament and during the holidays, or it's the tournament time in the quest for a state championship. I'm focused on that rather than trying to, okay, we got this game, getting all hyped up about it. Like just one game at a time. Let's get our minds right.
Yeah, and to piggyback off that, I don't care who you are or what the game is, or it's back to back. There's no excuse for giving up 77% from 2. You know what I mean? Like that's just more of just some things that you need to work on moving forward. I also, and we were talking about this too, Coach Riego and I were talking about this, like I wouldn't be shocked also moving forward if we see LN play a little bit more small ball, put Winston at the small ball 5 or Teague maybe, and put more guards out there. Just so you can get up and down a little bit more. You can press off makes and misses. You can change your fronts, defensively, because it definitely seemed like it was a very like vanilla game plan, like not showing too much, but I'm sure Steven will be making some adjustments if they run into Center Grove again in the tournament.
Danny?
My take home from the basketball game is Center Grove's balance. And there's a lot of people that are like, balance is boring. Like they want the stars. But if you look at Center Grove's body of work, okay, they have a win against Franklin. So they avenged their only loss of the season, I believe. And I think in that basketball game, Ava Grant had a game high 23. Against Indian Creek, it was Adriane just lacing the net from the 3-point line. In this basketball game, you guys mentioned Lily Bischoff and how she was the best player on the floor and the best guard on the floor. And to be the best guard on the floor for Center Grove is one thing, but also when Kaya Hurt and Kamara Mills are on the opposite basketball team, that's quite the feat. And I think it's a very safe hypothesis to assume that Rachel Wirtz has been the best player on the floor more than a couple of times when Center Grove has played. So if I'm in the coaches meeting preparing for Center Grove, I subscribe to the theory that I want to take away what a team does best. So I'm going to sit with my staff and I'm going to say, okay, what does Center Grove do best? And you're going to get the same crickets that we just got after rhetorically asking that question. We don't know what they do best. They're just balanced. Okay. And on the defensive side, I mean, I said it at the end of the scores table post game when we were talking about HSC and Fishers, but Center Grove guards the pack line better than anybody in the state. And Josh, I think the first I'd heard that was when you said it a couple of minutes ago that LN was 3 for 14 from 3.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you have a pack line defense, you got to make shots.
Mm-hmm.
It's just as simple as that. You have to make shots. And looked like LN didn't make shots. But that balance is really difficult to prepare for. And a huge advantage when you have a basketball game where, say, if you are top heavy with one or two really good players and those one or two really good players don't have it, Center Grove has the luxury of putting out a basketball game where 4 players or 5 players get 8 points each, and they can still win the basketball game 57-52. But again, Grant against Franklin, Aniah against Indian Creek, Lawrence. I didn't even mention Booker. Booker's probably their steadiest, best decision maker that cohesively keeps them together on both ends of the floor. So, Hank, where did you jump them to in your Fab 15? That came out today, right? Did you jump them into the top 3?
Oh yeah,
Lawrence
Central, HSE, Center Grove.
Yeah. So I mean, look, that balance is starting to really make sense for Center Grove, and I think they're a really tough out.
I think they have a star though, and I think it's Audrey Aniah. I think that when you're game plan for them, you start with Audrey Aniah, and how do we limit her? How do we keep her in check? I mean, she's a great player. Like, she's a noticeable presence out there. She can hit the 3 really well. I think she flows really well in that offense. But I think when you analyze Center Grove, it probably starts with Aniah, and that's not taking away anything from anybody else. Like, I think Josh, you and I were talking about. I think Booker is kind of like the secret weapon. She's the one that nobody's really talking about yet. But I mean, I remember after the season opener, Center Grove season opener, I was talking to Audrey Aniah and I brought up Avon. She's like, yeah, she had a really great summer. She's going to be one that nobody sees coming. And sure enough, here she is. She had a great game that night against Franklin Central, played really well against LN, and she fits in perfectly. But I think circling back to my main point, I think Audrey Aniah is kind of that focal point, that star that they have who can go off. But then, Danny, like you said, to your point, a team tries to take her away or contains her even just a little bit, they have the depth to punch it back. And I think Wirtz inside is a good weapon. And like you said, I mean, everybody else, Booker is phenomenally steady. And everything just fits well.
I think like I'm a big believer in the Center Grove team. I think they can go very, very far in the tournament. If you're going to beat Center Grove in the tournament, you have to make their guards uncomfortable. And that's not what happened on Saturday. I mean, they pretty much kick it wherever they wanted to on the floor. And like I said, they were 23 of 30 from the field. So if you're going to beat them, it's going to have to be a team that makes their guards really, really uncomfortable and gets them out of their stuff.
One other game to at least mention here, and that's Avon. They ended a 27-game losing streak by rallying from a 6-point fourth quarter deficit to beat Brownsburg. Some of the kids on that team hadn't even been born the last time that Avon beat Brownsburg, so fairly significant deal in a really great rivalry on the west side. That's the west side, right? I'm still learning my directions.
Definitely west side.
Okay, cool. I knew that. I'm smart. McKaylee Butts went for 22 points, and Aniah Smith had 18, and Nevaeh Wren picked up 6 rebounds. They're going to play each other again in the county tournament to start it in early January. And just because the random draw, it always seems to go this way, but I guarantee they'll probably play in the first or second round of sectionals as well. But great win for Avon. They're a fun team. It's been cool following them and being around them a little bit as they continue this upward trajectory under Will Stahl. And it's going to be a tough outcome come state tournament time.
Yeah, this county championship and this sectional is a toss-up. Like you said, Plainfield, Brownsburg, Avon, like any of those three teams could win it.
Mm-hmm. And Danville. Danville was in it last year. Yeah. Danville's a really good 3A team. And, I mean, not for nothing, like Tri-West are on the upswing. I think they'll draw either – it looks like Danville or Cascade as I look at this. So, I mean, try Westwood Shock and see if you can go in there too. Like it'll be a fun county tournament, but I want to make sure we shout out Avon and their big win there on Friday.
Just one quick point before we get on to it. And again, just Aniah Smith, like, you know, Avon, Plainfield, or Brownsburg, one of them is going to be the sectional champ. Aniah Smith might be the best player in the sectional. I mean, she had 39 against Plainfield earlier. Avon has wins against both Brownsburg and Plainfield respectively. But, you know, and Aniah Smith's been doing this for a minute too. Like if you date back to when Layla Abdurkeeb got hurt last year against Warren Central right before the tournament, Avon played Lawrence Central. They'll play again right before sectionals again this year. I mean, she had 30 in that basketball game. She had 31 against HSE. Like this kid gets buckets and she's small. I mean, she's got a small, like a low major recruitment right now, but she guards the ball really well. She's electric, can get into the paint, but Aniah Smith is fun to watch. But yeah, that's a sectional 12 is a toss up right now.
Yeah. And not to mention she had 11 assists against Brownsburg too. So,
I
mean, she's not just scoring it. Like she makes her teammates better, which like you said, is going to be a tough outcome sectional time.
You guys know where you can read more about Aniah Smith, huh? IndyStar.com, huh?
There you go, Hank.
12 years or whatever it is right now. So sign up and do that. I need to plug the Star more. That's something that I've told myself. So there's plug one. Moving on, though, main topic for today, with it being the holidays and something that we've been battering on a little bit in the text messages and a theme, honestly, with the coaches that we talked to. Lapel's coach mentioned it the other night when we were together. Somebody pointed out as a potential reason for some of these other games and results, but just how much of a grind it is this time of year. And I guess the best place to start this conversation is with the coaches and the players, the people who've done this, and just how do you handle this little week right here before Christmas when it feels like everybody's kind of on their last leg, energy and focus-wise. Christmas breaks on the horizon, a little bit of break from school, a chance to recharge for a lot of these teams that crammed a ton of games into the first month plus of the season. So for you guys, how did you handle this time of year?
I'll take it from a player's perspective and from a just player development coach perspective is you can't go away from your habits and your routines that you already have in place. So it's Christmas break. You don't have school. You don't have as much going on. I mean, you're getting together with family for holidays and stuff, but do not do anything different than you've been doing. Don't stay awake until 2 a.m. and then wake up for practice 8 a.m. or 9. Like I've seen so many, even at the college level down, people just like lose their mind as a player. Don't do that because you are your habits. And so this also might be, if somebody's listening, the time where you need to focus on changing your habits. Like it's a great time. We're heading into a new part of the season, I like to call it, where you need to really start focusing on your eating and your sleeping and the things that you're doing to take care of your body to recover. And also, I think this is a great time of the year. Like if your shot's not on or you just feel off in a certain way, like get yourself in the gym. Like no better place you're going to get confidence. Get yourself in the gym, get extra reps up, and focus on what you need to focus on. Just don't lose your mind and go eat all the fudge and all the cookies that your grandma's making, and you're going to pay for it. You have a few, but don't indulge yourself in the wrong things this time of year.
Yeah. So, I'll go from a high school coach's perspective. Like I would always schedule really difficult tournaments during Christmas because I wanted to stay sharp. I felt like if you have too many days off between games or you are playing in maybe only one tournament, but there's not really good competition, that's going to be 2 weeks where you're going to lose your edge. You're going to lose your conditioning. You're going to lose your muscle memory. You're going to lose rotations, ball screen coverage, your shot, whatever it is. So I would always schedule really, really difficult teams and difficult tournaments because I wanted our kids, like I said, to keep that edge. A lot of times also we would practice early in the morning so that way they could have the rest of the day to themselves. Because like you said, you are battling things like, family get-togethers in Christmas and, some people travel and you want to stay sharp. We would also bring boys in too, because you're getting to the time of year where, we would go best on best a lot. So we would very rarely scrimmage the JV because we just didn't really feel like that made us better. If we did, we would do like ratio scoring or something, or we bring in boys just to keep us tough, and but yeah, it's hard. I mean, like you said, this week was final exams week, and I'm sure Courtney and Danny would tell you the same things. A lot of student athletes, they also have all the honors classes. So you're dealing with final exams, and you're dealing with time off, and you're dealing with all the food, and so to stay sharp, like I said, schedule a lot of tough games, practice early in the morning if you can to give them the rest of their days off. Bring in some boys and just staying sharp, because what I've seen, what happens with a lot of teams is you come out of the chute after break, and that first game or two, you're not at your best. And that could end up costing you your conference championship, or that could end up costing you, like one of the goals that you have. So you got to stay sharp.
I have 2 points. The first is, this is a great opportunity to see other talent. One, from just the very basic entertainment value, is you're now at events, and we'll talk about the holiday schedule here, and I'll plug Indy Star for you. Hank just put a real great article off his Twitter about all of the great tournaments that are there, but there's great players in all of these events now. So, I would encourage all of these players to go watch it, because, currently right now, you ride the bus to the road game, you do your media with Hank afterwards for the Indy Star, you get on the bus, you go home, you maybe watch the post game, you go to bed, you wake up, you go to practice. You don't see another basketball game, but now there's other basketball games that you can see. So from an entertainment perspective, I think that stuff is fun and it can keep you fresh. Okay. Josh mentioned about keeping your edge. These holiday tournaments can also be about gaining your edge. And if you have a basketball team, let's take Noblesville, for example. They're the best example of this, because we're going to see it 2 times now in as many years where Noblesville has entered the holiday stretch not playing their best basketball. And not an indictment of Noblesville, but they'll be the first team and first coaching staff to tell you that they haven't played their best basketball yet. But last year at the Hall of Fame, Meredith Tippner plays great, Reagan Wilson plays amazing, and then hits the game winner. And then, we talked about it before we added Courtney on our old model of the podcast, but that's when Reagan Wilson really turned it on. Okay. Well, Noblesville this year doesn't have 3 consecutive wins at any point in time in the season. They don't have a 3-game winning streak yet. The most basketball games that they've won this year is 2. Well, what's waiting for them on December 22nd at Bedford North Lawrence is the number 1 team in the state in Lawrence Central. So they're approaching this basketball game as the same way they approach the Hall of Fame is, can we regain our edge? Can we regain our identity? Can we get a win against Lawrence Central to create a little bit of momentum? And if they were to get by that basketball game, they're going to get the winner of Lake Central and Bedford North Lawrence, 2 other top 20 basketball teams. And even if they don't, the loser of that basketball team game between Noblesville and Lawrence Central will play the loser of Bedford North Lawrence and Lake Central. So it's a good opportunity to have 2 quality opponents in one day. And Noblesville will be really interesting to watch, because this is the kind of basketball game that could springboard them through the rest of the season. And then to come full circle, if you remember in that dream Friday night sectional 8 last year, when we had 4 of the top 5 teams in the state playing back-to-back on Friday night, Noblesville entered that Friday night as the favorite. And if sectionals were to be tomorrow, they won't be the favorite. But if they beat Lawrence Central and beat Bedford North Lawrence and Lake Central, and then go on to run the table, Zionsville is there in the back half of their stretch, they could enter as the toughest team in sectional 8, just like they did last year. So I think it's a good opportunity for a team to not necessarily keep their edge, but to create it.
When they go again, too, on the 28th with Valparaiso at the 10 a.m. game, and then Norwell or Snyder in the second game of the Noblesville tournament on December 28th. So, and there's a lot of tests there for Noblesville. Looking at it big picture for you guys, how do you balance burnout? Like, how do you address burnout? Like, do you give the kids extra days off at all, or is there does the concern of it going the other way too quickly and them losing their edge and losing that, falling out of their routine too hard? does that kind of outweigh the benefits of taking a couple extra days off or some extra time off?
Yeah, I feel like coaches, you got to know your team. Like I was fortunate enough my last couple of years at Franklin, like our team was so competitive. They would have been mad, I think, if we would not have had hard practices and gotten after it. But I have also coached teams where maybe basketball is not their main sport, or maybe it's not their main, priority. And you do have to, like you said, like kind of, navigate those waters, a little bit. Cause like you said, burnout is a real thing. They're probably exhausted just mentally because, they had finals this week and, now we're going to be practicing over break. And so you definitely have to balance it. Sometimes, maybe you can cut practice down, till maybe like 90 minutes instead of going like the full like 2.5 hours. Like I said earlier, bringing in boys so that way you're not going best on best. Because a lot of times when you're going against each other in every drill and and you've been doing it now for 2 months, like that can get old. So just keeping it fresh by bringing in boys. Also when you're playing in these tournaments, it allows you to play more kids, because depending on your style of play, like, we like to get up and down a lot. So if you're playing multiple games, a day, you kind of have to, go to your bench a little bit. So more girls are getting more time, maybe extended minutes. But yeah, you definitely have to navigate it because, burnout is a real thing.
Courtney, what about you? What are your thoughts on the burnout side of things?
My thoughts are the same as Coach. Is you have to know your team. I think you have to have really good communication with your studs on your team and just having those conversations. Hey, how's your body feeling? How are you mentally feeling? And just constantly throughout the course of the season of knowing, it might not even be around this time, but hey, we need to take Monday off or we've had a big weekend, and just throwing those days off every once in a while does so much for the mental side of a player where they just know they have that day off. And I think we talked about on the podcast before, like when you look at the big picture of the year 2023, the girls right now, they've played in the state championships or the sectional of the 2023 season. They've played AAU. They've played a spring or a fall sport. Like we're at the end of a year where they might need a few days off after they play in their tournament just because of how much they've done, because it's not a college program yet. You're still dealing with kids that are doing other things. So it's a good time to give them that time off and to get them fired up and ready to go to go win a sectional, regional, semi-state, state championship.
Danny?
No, I mean, look, I think the studs know how to manage these. Okay. Like this isn't Chloe Spreen's first Christmas break. Okay. It's not Reagan Wilson's first Christmas break. It's not Julian Woodard's first Christmas break. I mean, Steve Reynolds managed Christmas breaks for Mila Reynolds and Maya Reynolds, and now for Kira Reynolds. So I think just falling back on that experience. But for me, you talk about the studs. I almost say you not worry about them. We saw at HSE and Fishers on what was it, Saturday night? Like the development of their role play. I mean, if you got a kid that's burned out, play your role players, okay? Because HSC's not winning that basketball game without Ant Green, and they're not winning that basketball game without Caleb Brindley, and they're not winning that basketball game without Addison Van Heusen. So this is a great opportunity for coaches to develop other talent and make yourself more like Center Grove. I mean, we talked about how Center Grove is so balanced, right? But you have this HSC formula. I talk about it on every single episode. Get 25 or 30 from Maya, get 15 or 20 from Stidham, get a double from KK, and then just take your spot production. But now you can really use these opportunities to develop some of those role players. And even since we've started this podcast, okay, which is episode 3, we've seen the development of players on this podcast that, quite honestly, we might not even have known their name, and now they're major pieces and integral parts to state championship runs without even knowing it. So I think your studs, like, I think they know how to manage this, and I think it's an opportunity to really engage other people on your basketball team.
One of the best things that I really learned as a player in college, Coach Versup would always tell me, like, you don't have to be in every rep in practice. And the same thing that Coach saying, like, get the other kids in there, let them do the reps, and it gives your studs kind of they're not getting the beating every single day. They can be a voice, and I agree 100% with what Danny just said.
We went a little bit long with the first segment, so we'll jump into the holiday.
Shocking.
Holiday, I know. The holiday tournaments. Courtney, what was the coolest holiday tournament that you played in when you were a player?
Coolest was the Hall of Fame Classic. We played against Warsaw. It was I think it was a triple overtime game. My first game. I don't remember too many shots from my career. I don't like talking about it, but I remember hitting a bank half court shot to send it to the championship game against the #1 team in the nation, Ben Davis. So that was a great tournament that we played in. Was the Classic.
I was at that game, Courtney. I remember it too.
Yeah, it was fun.
That had to be a pretty unique opportunity for you too, getting to play Ben Davis, the big 4A school at the height of their powers, like that, right?
Yeah, I think we had 2 10-second calls before, like in the first 30 seconds, because some of the girls on our team just peed down their leg with their trap. I mean, their defense, the full court press, it was amazing. And I'm pretty sure we had honestly, 2 or 3 10-second calls within the first minute, probably.
I've always wondered, what is it like playing in that arena specifically, in that Newcastle? I mean, it is so freaking big, and it's just such a unique thing. It feels different when you walk in there for whatever reason. I don't know, maybe I'm just dumb, but what's it like playing in there?
So there's this thing called the Elks Hoop Shoot, and so the state finals are at Newcastle. So when I was in elementary school, you get 25 free throws. It's either from the actual free throw line when you're younger, it's a little closer. I actually had shot in that gym at the state, so it wasn't my first time playing in that gym. But once you're in there, it's really not a super bright gym. It's kind of like one of those old. It's kind of a little bit darker, but you just feel the energy of the history in that gym. It's like a movie when you're in there. And I love that the fans are right there. We talked about this for being a host site for the girls' state, but they're just right there. And so the energy in that place is off the charts.
Josh, what about you? You have an experience coaching in there. I remember vividly that game. I think it was against Westfield.
Yeah, so we went into, and Courtney's right. There's no holiday tournament better than the Hall of Fame. We've played in others in the past, and there's nothing better just because of all the history, and you're playing in the biggest gym in the country. Don't tell Seymour that, but there's no tournament like it. So we were undefeated going into that game. We played Westfield, went to overtime. Alyssa Crockett hit a layup with 2-3 seconds left. We lost. And then we ended up playing Washington in the third place game. But South Bend, Washington ended up winning it because they had all 3 Reynolds girls at the time. And just the coaching and the players and just the history of that tournament. It's on TV. It's just a really cool experience. We got a chance to go there and go through the Hall of Fame and everything. It's a really, really neat experience. And you only get to go every so often. I think Franklin had only been one other time back in the 90s when they were in 3A, I think. And then when I was at Center Grove, I think they've only been once or twice. So you don't get asked very often. It's pretty special.
Yeah, it is a cool event, and it has that big game feel, which is unique. Being an outsider, I never really expected or would have thought that an in-season event like that could be such a big draw, such a cool thing.
It's pretty awesome.
Yeah. As for this year's event, I know we touched on it earlier, but Columbia City, Indian Creek, Jennings County, Lake Central. I think it's fair to say that in terms of matchups, Danny, the best second-round matchups, win or lose, however they get there, I think the most enticing would be Lake Central, Columbia City, just because they seem like they'd be an even matchup, similarly deep, similar play style, similar set of playmakers, and Indian Creek, Jennings County, where you have Faith Wiseman going to IU against Michigan State commit Julianne Woodard.
Yeah, Lake Central versus Columbia City. If we do get that, it's 2 teams that could end up playing in the postseason in an elimination game. So I think that's what's unique. Just a ton of guards and Sheets and Tonkel and Baxter and, looking at Lake Central's guards, like there's a kid named Riley Malosnik. We talked about Cameron Runner, about having some kind of stuff to her, right? There's some stuff to Riley Malosnik. Like she's a really good basketball player. Wimberly is a difficult guard to stay in front of. So that'll be a fun matchup to kind of see Addie Baxter if she ends up being the one that guards her. In the absence of having seen the Snyder game, to deal with that kind of athleticism that Wimberly brings, I think would be an interesting thing. It's also, you have these basketball teams that you've seen early in the year. It's interesting to see them again, maybe a month later. Okay. So take Jennings County, for example, right? Molly Ernstis is shooting 47% from three. Okay. So that proved at Sneakers for Santa when we first launched this podcast that wasn't a flash in the pan when she had whatever it was, 7 threes, I think 5 or 6 of them in the first half. She's shooting 40% from three. Now, interestingly, like Molly Ernst, if you look at this, and just to put that 47 into perspective, okay, like Olivia Nickerson is shooting 55% from three, according to Max Preps. Okay. She plays a video game out there when it comes to shooting the three. Okay. But Maya McAlusky shooting 39% from three. Jayla Lampley shooting 39% from three. Their teammate Stidham is shooting 35%. 47 that's a ridiculous number. Okay. Also with Ernstis, 60% of her field goal attempts are 3-point field goal attempts. So as this stuff becomes more public and she becomes more of a household name, does that change Julianne Woodard's approach, or at least the way that other teams guard Julianne Woodard? The South is a mess. Josh talks about it all the time, right? Aside from the city schools, Center Grove has maybe emerged, but who is Jennings County right now? Okay. They have the quality win against Washington without Kira Reynolds, but there's that asterisk without Kira Reynolds. I think this is a really good opportunity to see, okay, now Woodard has a 47% 3-point shooter on the wing. Can Christy Sigler exploit that? Can she get some more space to avoid double downs from Woodard? Can she get her more involved earlier in the basketball game? I think some of these things that we get to kind of see in the Hall of Fame. So I'm anxious. Any combination of win, loss, and matchup versus matchup, I think is interesting. But you start to see now Molly Ernstis, who, again, at the risk of redundancy, just hitting the threes and Seekers for Santa. Now you get to see it again, not one more time, but twice in the same day. So I think we're collecting information now to make picks and to really kind of seed this thing out to see who's going to make a deep run.
Hey, Courtney and Josh, what do you guys do between games at the Hall of Fame Classic? Like, do you take them over to the Hall of Fame? Do you go check out that Steve Alford Hotel, I think is a thing?
So we stayed at the Steve Alford Hotel, and
really?
we tried to because the year before we won regional, so we tried to do exactly what we did at regional, right, with the same thing in between games. So while the girls are resting and eating, the coaches are game planning for that second game. But yeah, they always have there's 2 hotels. There's the Steve Alford Hotel, and I forget the other one. And you get some food catered, and our athletic department always did a really, really nice job with that, just to make sure that all the the players, the coaches were taken care of and ready to go for that second game.
Same. We just went back to the hotel, chilled, ate some food, get off your feet, and start getting your mind right for the next game.
Speaking of a tournament with fun things to do in between games, that was a good segue by me, if I do say so myself. You can go up to Twin Lakes. Danny, I'm excited to talk about this one with you. December 27th, 28th. I read on Wikipedia that there's the Indiana Beach Amusement Park up there.
Oh,
and the
yeah.
was born in Monticello, Indiana. So do with that information what you will.
Monticello, I believe, right, Courtney?
Okay.
Monticello, Indiana.
Monticello. Yeah,
Monticello.
no being played up in Monticello. Maybe.
What a state.
They're actually, so there was a commercial that says there's more than corn in Indiana, and it was for that amusement park. There's more than corn in Indiana and Monticello, Indiana. That's how I knew that it was pronounced Monticello. But I guess outside of vegetable talk, is corn a vegetable? But Twin Lakes. Can I just transition this back to basketball?
No,
Yeah,
you can't, because I want to shout out to people at Indiana Beach Amusement Park if they're listening. I know Courtney might have some hookups.
There's a song. You're lucky I didn't sing the song. Like, there's
want to
people
sponsor
listening on this
us.
podcast. They're like, yeah, dude, I know exactly the commercial he's talking. I guarantee you that there
If
are
I do
people
have
that
a
know.
shout out, if you are ever in Monticello, so my husband has some clients up there he works with. Oak and Barrel Restaurant is fire. So there is a really, really good restaurant. A lot of people don't know about. It's called Oak and Barrel. If you're up in that area, go eat there.
See there, folks.
Yeah, we have an Oak and Barrel here in Greenwood. It's really good.
Okay, there we go.
See, folks, you don't even have to we haven't even gotten to the basketball yet, which is really good. And we've already given you like a full freaking day's itinerary. Like, how great is this show? Sponsor us, Indiana Beach Amusement Park in Monticello, Indiana. The best amusement park in the land, probably. Anyway, the big event, the Twin Lakes event, I mean, that field, Danny, is stacked. It's unbelievable. Like, that one and the Toyota Classic, I think, are 1-2 on my list, with the Limestone as a close third. But, I mean, sticking with the Twin Lakes tournament as I continue bouncing around, I apologize. McCutcheon's there, you get a chance to see Lily Graves. Faith Christian is Maya Layton, we talked about before. Twin Lakes has Olivia Nickerson, Addie Bozeman. Mount Vernon's up there with Ellery Minch. Crown Point has Ava Zylkowski. Tri-County Bishop Chittard is playing Crown Point. That'll be a great matchup. Anna Caskey's healthy. That'll be an interesting matchup inside. I mean, there are just so many great matchups, and they're all crammed into one over a 2-day stretch. Man, it's going to be great.
This will be everybody's really statewide introduction to Lily Graves. I think it's as anticipated of a debut as we remember, and some of the other debuts like Sydney Parrish. I remember her first basketball game she played at Southport. They fouled out like their entire basketball team. They finished the basketball game with 4. She finishes with 31. It was a great opener. Ashlyn Shade's first ever basketball game was at Lawrence North. She ends up with 22 in that basketball game, but the team that she played at Lawrence North had Jayla Smith, who eventually won Miss Basketball. It had Lauren Gunn, who went on to play Division I basketball at Valparaiso. Katie Davidson, who started her career at Miami of Ohio. Christian Young, who went on to the University of Illinois, Chicago. Like, that team was loaded and a really good basketball team. And Ashlyn Shade, in her first ever basketball game, goes out and hangs 22. I was at Lily Graves' first ever varsity basketball game. Okay. And indulge me here for a moment, because I've been itching to kind of tell this story. It's a 52-49 basketball game against Cascade at home. Okay. So it's a close basketball game. And I think everybody can remember that she had 36 in that basketball game. Okay. But Cascade cuts it to 52-49. Jeff Kanoy calls timeout, brings them over to the bench, and coming out of that timeout with 4 minutes left in the fourth quarter of a 3-point basketball game, Lily Graves hits a 3, gets an and 1, hits 2 free throws, gets a steal, dribbles the length, and goes on a 10-0 run by herself to make that a 62-49 basketball game. And you could book it for her first ever varsity win. And she had 36 and was outstanding. It's as good of a debut as I had seen since Sydney Parrish and Ashlyn Shade. Okay. Now, to collide Lily Graves' name with those two names is way too early, way too premature, and maybe irresponsible. Okay. But go see her, because this kid, they've won 8 straight basketball games. If you look at that sectional, McCutcheon does figure right now to be a big favorite to be a sectional champ and play in the regional. This is a good opportunity for everybody to see Lily. She's going to be a household name for the next 4 years in this state. She is outstanding. And I've been to 3 of their basketball games, and every time I'm there, Purdue, Notre Dame, somebody is there watching her. She's outstanding. Such a fun watch. So go watch her in this holiday tournament, in between meals at Oak and Barrel.
Yeah, and it's just a Oak and Barrel plug. I like it. So I think
we're working on our sponsors.
Listen, they have phenomenal buffalo chicken like ranch dip. It's unbelievable. But just to piggyback on what Coach said there, like, that's a nice thing about Christmas break and holiday tournaments is, I feel like a lot of times, and we're guilty of this as well on this show, you kind of have like a 4A or like a central Indiana bias, because that's what we know. It's just what's on the circle. But during the holidays, a lot of people are off of work or they're off of school. So what better way to like introduce yourself to some of the top teams, top players, top coaches around the state and go to these tournaments, because the future Ashland Shades or the future Sydney Parishes are playing in this tournament, and there's no better way to see what these girls and these teams are about.
Absolutely. Another one before we move on, again, that's Indiana something amusement park on the beach, I think, in Monticello.
Indiana Beach.
There it is. The Toyota Classic, it's an early one on the 22nd, so it's coming up quick. This is just the one other one that I wanted to hit on personally, then I'll turn over to you guys. Another one with some really good cross-class matchups. It's kind of like that one class feels how I described it, where you have Danville and Silver Creek. You have Princeton's 9-2 coming in there, North Posey, Mater Day, Wood Memorial. I mean, there's a wide variety of classes there, and obviously the headliner there, Danny Boy, is Silver Creek Danville.
Yeah, Silver Creek played at Bedford North Lawrence in a 30-29 basketball game, and I will use this as an opportunity. Like, we have some high school coaches that listen to this podcast, okay? And they listen to us break down their game or preview their game, and a lot of times they'll send texts, okay? Scott Shane sent me a text leading up to that basketball game, and he kind of gave me the notes, and I didn't share them, and now that I'm on the air, I will share them. He said they had to get every rebound in that basketball game, and sure as heck, they gave up 14 offensive rebounds to Bedford North Lawrence. Now, Bedford ended up winning the basketball game in a game where they went 1 of 20 from three. God, I have this written down somewhere, but they went like 1 of 20 from three, 10 of 43 from the field. They missed 2 layups. Madison Bailey didn't score in that basketball game. I think Spring was held to 11. Brooklyn Wren had 6 and Emma Shane had 4. Like, they got 10 from Alpha and Beta there. So Silver Creek, I just keep waiting for them to take the next step. And Scott's out of his mind right now because Bedford gave them the game for them to be able to go into Bedford and North Lawrence and win that basketball game, and they didn't perform. So this is now another opportunity for them to turn the corner against a really good basketball team in Danville in a holiday tournament to see if they can get their season going. Because right now it is. And I would say this, and I know Scott listens, they're stuck in the mud a little bit, and they're a better basketball team than what they've put forth. But Silver Creek, again, when you have Brooklyn Wren and Emma Shane in that basketball game, like they should be better. And in that basketball game too, we talked about how would somebody guard Chloe Spreen, okay? And so now, when we've had an opportunity to watch that basketball game and see, we didn't know if they were going to put Gant and keep Wren in the paint. Scott did both, okay? Scott gave about half the basketball game to allow Brooklyn Wren to guard Chloe Spreen straight up, and then he actually put Lydia Wright. It actually wasn't Gant, so we were kind of half right with that. He put Lydia Wright on her, put Brooklyn Wren in the paint as a rim protector, and she blocked a couple of shots when she did that. But what that does is illustrate that Scott's trying to figure out who they are still too. Like, are we best with Brooklyn Wren in the paint protecting it, or am I best with putting Brooklyn Wren on the perimeter and staying connected to Chloe Spreen? So more opportunities for somebody like Scott to take a really talented team like Silver Creek and turn the corner.
Danville Connors, the Emma Anslet, Addison Davis, they're a really good 3A team. They're a type of team that'll make a run in the county tournament, I'm sure, and they have the capability of making a run in the state tournament as well. And the winner there will play Gibson Southern most likely, which has Gabby Spin, Chloe Graham. They're really good too for there. I mean, they're a really good team. And did I pronounce the other school right, Princeton, or do y'all have some weird pronunciation for that word too? Like
Princeton?
East.
Oh no. That's Princeton, home of Jackie Young. So that's Jackie's crib.
No disrespect. I just wanted to make sure it was right. A little disrespect. What about y'all before we sign off here, because I think it's going to teeter off the rails again soon. Is there anything else that's jumping out to you? Any other thoughts or things you wanted to talk about?
Go ahead, Court.
I would just close out. This is for everybody, whether you're a player, a coach, a fan, just any human listening to this, is where are you going in 2024? Like, now is the time to get really intentional. Don't wait until January starts. So take time, take, a few hours over 2 days or whatever it is, and really dial in, like, who are you going to be in 2024, and what are you going to focus on? And that goes for anybody. So that's my closing words as we head into closing out 2023.
Josh, top that.
Yeah, for me, I think the one thing that I just keep the word that we just keep throwing around is parity. Like, I think in previous years we knew who were the contenders for state championships in 4A and 3A and 2A and 1A. We knew who the candidates were for Miss Basketball. Like, we knew who were the front runners for Indiana All-Stars. I do not remember a year where it could be anyone on December 19th. Like, I don't remember a year like that. Like, it could go in so many different directions. Like, I would not be surprised, if there's 10 or 12 teams in 4A that could win it all. So that's exciting, I think, for the game of basketball, is that it could be anybody.
Cordy,
to piggyback on that point, so we need to distinguish, we don't publish a power rankings, but power rankings are different than the standings. But then there's also who has a chance to win the state championship. And I think we're still very much in the, collecting the information to figure that out. Okay. Here in this area, we talk about Lawrence Central a lot. We talk about Hamilton Southeastern a lot, right? Both those basketball teams might not even get out of their sectional. Okay. And we saw HSE having to erase, what was it, an 8-point fourth quarter lead to beat Fishers the other night. We watched LC go against LN and close in an 82nd 9-0 run to win that basketball game. And both of those teams that they got by are in those teams' sectionals respectively. And yes, we do have Center Grove, but who are the teams right now outside of the city? Like, is Snyder going to make a statement here in the next couple of weeks? Is Columbia City, is South Bend, Washington, with the return of Kira Reynolds going to make a run? Is Jennings County going to step up as kind of that fourth statue on Mount Rushmore, as really one of the favorites going into it? So I think there's a lot that has to be still talked about and decided on the floor. We get a lot of these matchups, but I do have a question, just to, of course, Hank will love me just prolonging this, but you get into these, take sectional 8, for example, with HSE, Fishers, and Noblesville. Okay. And then you have sectional 10 with LC and LN. Are you guys taking the sectional 8 and the sectional 10 champ to win the 4A state championship and laying the field? Because with the field, you have Columbia City, you have Bedford North Lawrence, you have Fort Wayne Snyder, South Bend Washington, Center Grove, Franklin, Silver Creek, a lot of really good basketball teams there, but you lose kind of those top heavy 1s and 2s. Are you guys late? Do you guys think that we have favorites, and is it LC and HSE?
Well, that's what's fun about this system, Danny, is that it's also contingent on matchups, and with all these stupid random draws, for real, I know I say stupid flippantly, but it is dumb. There's no way to know what the matchups are going to be, so it's hard for me to, at least for me personally, I'll speak for myself, it's hard to project how it's going to look because it's so matchup contingent. We talked about the size factor. What happens if you run into another team in regional who does have that size, like a surprise sectional team? Well, that's going to change my prediction entirely. And I can't just handicap it out like I did the year, Josh, when your team made it to the state final, where we kind of knew, okay, this is where it's going to be. Nobles will have to play Homestead in the regional, and then the winner there will probably have to play Snyder. And then on Josh's side, it was BNL is the team that's going to be sitting there if they can get by Center Grove. So we don't really have that predictability. That said, I would probably take the field just based on the unpredictability of this year. What do you guys think, or how would you lean?
Well, like you said, if you really look at it, this year, this might be Jennings County's year. I mean, they might finally break that streak of beating BNL. And then remember, regional is only a 1 game now, and you have to play Franklin or Center Grove. It could be Center Grove's year. I mean, Franklin, like Danny said, there's so many different scenarios, and it does seem like it's easier to get there if you're a Southern team, because you don't have to go up against these top 10 teams night after night after night in the sectional and in the regional the way that sectional 10 and sectional 8 have to. So sometimes it's about the draw and who you're not playing early than it is, like having like that strength of schedule, I guess.
Yeah, I think on when it comes to tournament, it's all about your draw, and there's a little luck that plays into on who you actually get, and that's whether it's in high school girls basketball or it's in the NCAA tournament. Like where you get, there's a little luck in there. So that's why we play the game. You show up. It's not a given, and so I'm going with I think the field because you never know what it's going to look like.
Real quickly, I'm going to pull up Danny here and Courtney. Just a one-word yes or no. Do you like the random draw element of the state tournament?
No.
Interesting. I wasn't sure because I was curious to hear like a small school perspective. That's an episode for later day. If nobody else has anything else, I guess we'll just wish everybody a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and we'll talk to y'all either next week or the week after once we all get back from celebrating our holidays. But get out there, enjoy some good high school basketball, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Happy holidays, everybody. Happy New Year.